Ryuji proposed a friendly match between Korea's and Japan's S-rank hunters, allowing the Korean team to set the rules. Mr. Go supported the idea but suggested excluding mage and non-combat hunters, as their strength would be difficult to evaluate. Yunho then established the battle rules. Anyone grabbed by the wrist, touched on the back, or knocked to the floor would be considered defeated. The match was designed as a team battle, simulating the chaotic conditions they might face during the Jeju Island raid. Ryuji agreed, and with the rules set, the practice match was ready to begin. Representing Korea were hunters Baek Yunho, Ma Dongwook, Hunter Cha Hai-in, and Lim Tae-gyu. On Japan's side, the team consisted of Kenzo Tanaka, Minoru Hashino, Atsushi Kumamoto, and Kano Tawata. The stage was set for an intense showdown between the top hunters of both nations. As Jinwoo observed the match unfold, he couldn't help but notice that Goto Ryuji wasn't participating. Perhaps Goto simply wanted to gauge their strength. Regardless, witnessing a battle between S-rank hunters was a rare opportunity, and Jinwoo was eager to see how it played out. Kenzo Tanaka squared off against Ma Dongwook. Having already assessed both Ma and Baek from their earlier fight, Kenzo couldn't shake the feeling that Baek was holding something back. Meanwhile, the 4-on-4 setup seemed to suggest that Tawata Kano's opponent would be Cha Hai-in. Tae-gyu, on the other hand, seemed hopeful that their opponents wouldn't go too hard on them, while Dongwook announced the start of the match. Dongwook's ability to enlarge himself signaled his preference for strength-based combat, a straightforward approach that Kenzo respected. As the sparring began, the tension in the room was palpable. Tae-gyu quickly noted his opponent's speed, realizing that engaging in close-quarters combat would put him at a severe disadvantage. The battle was only beginning, and the hunters were about to reveal their true strength. His specialty was maintaining distance and attacking from afar, a strategy he quickly employed by launching a magic arrow. Gun-hee, watching the battle unfold, noted the facility's reinforced construction, built with high-quality essence stones. Ordinary hunters would struggle to damage its walls, yet in just seconds, the place was already in ruins. He sighed at the reality of sending young hunters into battle against some of the world's strongest S-ranks, and resolved to be prepared for anything, even if it meant breaking an opponent's wrist if necessary. Meanwhile, Kumamoto observed Baek Yunho, believing he was needlessly wasting energy. Without adhering to any specific rules, Kumamoto lunged at him, operating purely on the principle of survival of the fittest. Baek sensed his opponent's intent to kill, but noticed hesitation. Was Kumamoto afraid? As Kumamoto himself questioned whether he was truly suited to be a hunter, Baek contemplated his behavior. Was the man exceptionally perceptive, or simply a coward? Baek soon realized Goto's true motive. This wasn't just a friendly match. He was testing their strength, likely in preparation for the battle against the ants. This understanding ignited something within Baek, pushing him to reveal a glimpse of his true power. His expression hardened, fierce determination settling in his eyes. The intensity of his gaze alone was enough to unnerve Kumamoto, who was suddenly overwhelmed by a deep sense of dread. His confidence wavered, and for the first time, he felt the instinctive urge to retreat. But Baek didn't give him the chance. He surged forward with incredible speed, claws bared, aiming straight for his opponent. As the match continued, Yong-soo and his associate watched in awe. Compared to this, their previous battles had been nothing more than child's play. The sparring sessions produced clear results. Tanaka Kenzo emerged victorious against Ma Dongwook, though Ma took his unexpected defeat in stride, laughing it off. Meanwhile, Hoshino Minoru bested Lim Tae-gyu. Baek prepared for his turn, sensing that he was being underestimated compared to Cha Hai-in. On the other side of the arena, Tawata struggled to keep up with Hai-in's unpredictable movements. Her nickname, the Dancer, was a reflection of her swift and deadly precision, though she found the title embarrassing and discouraged its use. With effortless grace, she dodged Tawata's attacks and swiftly eliminated him from the match. Without hesitation, she moved to assist Baek, who was now facing two opponents. As she approached, Kumamoto attempted a sneak attack, but before he could land a hit, Hai-In reacted with blinding speed, unleashing a flurry of punches so fast that the onlookers could barely comprehend what had happened. In the blink of an eye, she had struck him multiple times, leaving everyone stunned. Realizing she had let her instincts take over, Hai-In quickly composed herself. Observers noted that while Kumamoto became dangerously unpredictable when enraged, he still had the strength to clear a B-rank gate alone. However, Goto, watching closely, decided not to intervene just yet, though he was ready to step in if necessary. As Kumamoto prepared to strike Hai-In again, Jinwoo stepped in, cautioning that they were taking things too far for what was supposed to be a sparring match. Enraged, Kumamoto attempted to grab him, only to be effortlessly slammed to the ground. Goto, observing Jinwoo's movements, couldn't hide his confusion. Was this man really a mage-type hunter? Hanekawa confirmed that, according to official records, he was. Meanwhile, Jinwoo suggested calling the match a loss for the South Korean hunters, and Hai-In agreed. Baek, acknowledging the overwhelming strength of the Japanese team, admitted that even transforming wouldn't have changed the outcome. With the match settled, Goto approached Jinwoo directly, his gaze intense. Speaking through a translator, he issued a challenge, a one-on-one fight. Jinwoo listened carefully as the translator relayed Goto's request. It was clear that Japan's strongest hunter wasn't just looking to show off. If that were his goal, he would have challenged one of Korea's top guild leaders. Instead, he was specifically interested in Jinwoo. Jinwoo wasn't opposed to the idea. After honing his skills in the Demon's Castle, he was eager to test himself against Japan's best. At the same time, he could see that Goto was just as curious about his abilities. However, Goto was caught off guard by Jinwoo's relaxed demeanor. As Jinwoo responded through the translator, there was a moment of hesitation before his answer was relayed. He accepted the challenge, but on one condition. Goto, intrigued, asked what the condition was. The translator explained, Jinwoo would only fight if Goto intended to go all out. This response surprised Goto. He had expected hesitation, maybe even reluctance, but instead, Jinwoo was the one making demands. Amused, Goto studied him, finding the situation more entertaining than expected. He wasn't worried about injuries. With Shimizu, an S-rank healer present, any damage they sustained would be dealt with immediately. Turning to Shimizu, Goto instructed her to be ready. After all, even Jinwoo would need her assistance in a few minutes. By now, the onlookers, S-rank hunters, and association employees alike had gathered around, a mix of excitement and concern in their expressions. Among them was Hai-In, deeply worried for Jinwoo. But as she recalled how he had taken down an A-rank dungeon boss and over 100 high orcs, her concern turned into anticipation. Her heart pounded at the thought of what he was capable of. Baek, standing beside her, recognized her unease. Having worked with her on several raids, he understood her struggles. When she admitted that she couldn't keep avoiding other hunters forever, especially with the Jeju Island raid approaching, he nodded in acknowledgement. Curious, Hai-In asked Baek about his connection to Jinwoo and why he wasn't trying to dissuade him from such a dangerous fight. Under normal circumstances, he might have. But this was no ordinary situation. Jinwoo's opponent was none other than Goto Ryuji, Japan's strongest S-rank hunter. Hai-In couldn't understand why Baek wasn't more concerned, so she pressed him for an answer. To her surprise, Baek admitted that he shared the same reason as she did for not interfering. This revelation caught Hai-In off guard. Normally composed, she wasn't used to someone understanding her feelings so well. Despite her worry, an undeniable thrill coursed through her. A part of her couldn't shake the thought, what if Jinwoo could actually achieve the impossible? Baek smiled knowingly, his eyes gleaming with anticipation as he turned his attention back to the fight. He, too, believed that Jinwoo was no ordinary hunter. His growth was unnatural, almost as if he were an awakened being, continuously evolving. Then, without warning, Goto attacked. A powerful swing cut through the space where Jinwoo's head had just been. Yet to Goto's shock, He had missed. His attempt to knock Jinwoo down with a single, overwhelming strike had failed. Jinwoo had not only dodged, but had already repositioned himself at a safe distance. His reaction speed was astonishing, far too fast for someone classified as a mage-type hunter. Goto's eyes narrowed. This kind of movement? Could Jinwoo be an assassin-class hunter instead? The thought intrigued him. If that was the case, he was determined to expose Jinwoo's true abilities. Meanwhile, Jinwoo stood at a distance, listening to the rhythm of his own heartbeat. It was fast but steady. He wasn't afraid. He was excited. Goto's strength was undeniable, on a completely different level than any other S-rank hunter he had faced. Yet, Jinwoo felt assured. He had come too far, leveled up too much, now at level 97, to doubt himself. His confidence showed in his expression. Goto scowled the moment he saw it. That smile, it irritated him. Annoyed, he unleashed a wave of mana so intense that the onlookers shuddered. The sheer pressure of his presence sent a ripple of unease through the crowd, making them question whether this was still just a sparring match. The battle intensified. Spectators were mesmerized by Goto's aggressive offense and Jinwoo's flawless evasions. While many thought Jinwoo was barely managing to keep up, Hai-In saw the truth. He wasn't just keeping up, he was provoking Goto, baiting him into attacking recklessly. Meanwhile, Jong-In returned from his break, only to find himself in the middle of an intense showdown. The air was thick with tension. What had started as a sparring match had escalated into something far more serious. Goto had realized that Jinwoo was no ordinary opponent, and his frustration was reaching its peak. Then, something shifted. Goto made a decision. Holding back was no longer an option. His rage boiled over, and his intent turned lethal. He wasn't just trying to defeat Jinwoo anymore. He was going to kill him. At that exact moment, Jinwoo's system issued an urgent notification. Warning, someone nearby has murderous intent. Jinwoo's senses sharpened. The danger was real. With terrifying speed, Goto launched a precise, deadly strike, his sharp nails slicing toward Jinwoo's eye. At the last second, Jinwoo twisted his body, barely avoiding the fatal blow. A thin cut appeared on his cheek, a close call. Instinctively, Jinwoo's hand shot out, gripping Goto's wrist in an ironclad hold. The moment he made contact, realization struck. This wasn't a sparring match anymore. If he continued treating it as one, he wouldn't just lose, he might not walk away at all. Flashes of past encounters rushed through his mind. Hwang Dong-suk, Kang Tai-shik, the urgent system quests that had pushed him to his limits. This was the same. For the first time, he saw it clearly. If he had been even a fraction slower, he might have lost an eye. Goto was stunned. He couldn't comprehend how Jinwoo was this strong. What confused him even more was the fact that Jinwoo had deliberately grabbed his hand instead of his wrist, a subtle but deliberate choice. Jinwoo smirked, sensing Goto's confusion, and hinted that the outcome could have been much different if he had chosen otherwise. The air between them grew tense as both men stared each other down, ready to escalate this sparring session into an all-out battle. But before things could spiral out of control, Beck and Hai-In intervened. Beck gripped Jinwoo's shoulder firmly, while Hai-In grabbed his wrist with all her strength, holding him back. On the other side, Hoshino Minoru restrained Goto, while Kei cast an ice spell, forming a barrier between them to defuse the situation. Jinwoo turned to see Baek's serious expression as he reminded him that Goto was set to lead the Japanese team in just a few days. A fight between them now could have severe consequences. Hai-In echoed the same concern. Their words brought Jinwoo back to reality, and with the tension cooling down, Beck suggested calling off the match. Recognizing that things had gone too far, Hanekawa agreed. The fight was over. As the dust settled, Beck turned to Jinwoo, asking if he had overstepped by stepping in. Jinwoo reassured him that he hadn't. The moment was intense, but Beck's intervention had been necessary. The gathered onlookers slowly approached. Their perceptions of Jinwoo completely changed. Dong-wook, the guild master of the famed White Tiger Guild, was the first to speak. He was amazed that Jinwoo had gone toe-to-toe with Goto and walked away with only a scratch. Admiring Jinwoo's physique, Dong-wook playfully invited him to join the White Tiger Guild. However, Jong-in quickly corrected him, reminding everyone that Jinwoo was officially registered as a mage-class hunter. Dong-wook was visibly shocked. Jinwoo, meanwhile, took a moment to reflect. He had learned a lot from this encounter, not just about Goto, but about everyone around him. Yet, despite their strength, not a single person had noticed the soldiers lurking in his shadow. Not even Goto Ryuji. That fact alone spoke volumes. As President Go approached, Jinwoo gave him his decision. He would not be joining the upcoming raid. Go Gunhee was visibly surprised. This was the last thing he had expected to hear. Meanwhile, Goto checked himself over. Despite the cool air, he realized his forehead was covered in sweat. Over at the White Tiger Guild, Beck let out a deep breath. Even after Jinwoo and Goto had left the gym, his heart was still racing. He couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. The idea of a hunter who could grow stronger through reawakening had always been a mere theory, but now he had seen it with his own eyes. He thought about Jinwoo's potential, his worth. It was impossible to put a number on it. Recruiting someone like Jinwoo seemed out of the question, but Baek knew that forming some kind of working relationship was still possible, even if Jinwoo never officially joined his guild. Just then, his phone vibrated. Pulling it out of his pocket, he saw a notification from the association. It was the final list of hunters selected for the ant extermination mission, scheduled for 4 days from now. Baek scrolled past the list of Japanese hunters, his eyes scanning the names of the Korean participants. Suddenly, his breath caught in his throat. Sung Jinwoo's name was missing. His heart pounded as he shot up from the bench in shock. Elsewhere, Goto Ryuji pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. Vice Guild Master Shigeo Matsumoto picked up. Goto, trying to keep his voice steady, spoke urgently. "There's an incredible hunter in Korea, someone who might even be stronger than me." Matsumoto, skeptical, asked for the hunter's name. "Sung Jinwoo," Goto replied. "The recently reawakened S rank." Matsumoto frowned. That name didn't appear on the finalized list of Korean hunters. "What?" Goto asked, stunned. Matsumoto double-checked and read off the names. Jong-in, Dong-wook, Baek, Hae-in, Tae-gyu, Byung-gyu. No Sung Jinwoo, he confirmed, trying to assure Goto that everything was in order. But Goto wasn't convinced. His mind reeled as he tried to process what he had just experienced. Meanwhile, on Jeju Island, deep within Hallasan Bengnok Dam, the crater lake atop Mount Halla, the ant colony faced a crisis. Once thriving, their kingdom was now on the brink of starvation. Food was scarce, and in desperation, even their young had resorted to cannibalism. The queen of the ants understood the harsh reality. The island could no longer sustain them. Change was necessary. She knew they needed a new kind of warrior, a leader strong enough to guide them, to inspire fear in their enemies, and to ensure the colony's survival. Her resolve hardened. They must become stronger. She commanded her children to consume everything, to evolve, to adapt. And then, from the depths of the colony, a new force emerged. A deafening screech echoed through the nest, a sound that heralded the birth of a monster. Their future rested in the hands of this new, unstoppable leader. Back in Seoul, Jinwoo arrived home with his mother, Kyung-hee, after her hospital discharge. The moment they opened the door, chaos greeted them. Gina had turned the living room into a disaster zone, while Jinwoo had been inside the demon's castle. Jinwoo sighed and pinched her cheek, making her yelp. Kyung-hee laughed, scolding him playfully. "To think the first thing I do after 4 years is clean the apartment." She insisted on tidying up despite Jinwoo's protests. Gina joined in, and before long, so did Jinwoo. As they worked together, the apartment slowly transformed. For so long, their home had felt empty. But with their mother back, it finally felt warm again. That night, for the first time in a long while, Jinwoo slept soundly, without worry. The next morning, he awoke to find his mother already up. She looked at him, a hopeful expression on her face. "Did you hear anything about your father while I was asleep?" Jinwoo's smile faltered. He shook his head. The question lingered in his mind. If she knew he had become a hunter, if she knew he had followed in his father's footsteps, what would she say? His father's disappearance was the reason his mother refused to leave their old apartment. Despite Jinwoo now being wealthier than most people would ever dream, they still lived there, paying rent every month. She refused to give up hope. She believed his father would return one day. Jinwoo watched her in silence, understanding the depth of her faith. The Jeju Island raid loomed ahead. But right now, nothing was more important than his family. Across the country, the story exploded into the headlines. South Korea and Japan join hands to reclaim Jeju Island. On television, an expert explained the gravity of the situation. The magic beast ants are evolving at an alarming rate, he warned. The upcoming mission may be our last chance to stop them. The show then displayed footage of the magic beast responsible for the devastating attacks in Japan. The image on the screen sent a shudder through the audience. It was an ant, but it looked even more human than before, with large wings sprouting from its back. A stunned silence filled the studio until a comedian on the panel blurted out, "And that thing can fly." The expert nodded grimly, explaining that this creature was the catalyst for the Korea-Japan alliance. However, the public's reaction wasn't as rational. People began questioning why Sung Jinwoo's name was missing from the list of Korean hunters participating in the Jeju Island raid. Doubts about his abilities spread like wildfire. Mockery followed. An S rank? More like a coward. So much for Korea's strongest new hunter. While this backlash annoyed Jinwoo, he was more concerned about his sister, Gina, who tended to pay attention to things like this. As he scrolled through social media, his phone rang. The caller ID flashed, "Jinho." The moment Jinwoo picked up, Jinho's excited voice filled the line. "Hyung, I finally moved out of that motel. Got my own place." Jinho's excitement didn't stop there. He had found an office space, a potential guild headquarters, and wanted Jinwoo to check it out. Curious, Jinwoo agreed. When he arrived at the location, he immediately understood why Jinho sounded so confident. The building was spacious, modern, and well located. Clearly, Jinho had put a lot of thought into the choice. Jinho, beaming with pride, explained, "We need a proper office to form the guild. I picked the best place near your apartment, so it's convenient." Jinwoo silently assessed the office. It was far too big for just the two of them. Noticing his reaction, Jinho grinned. "We need at least 3 people to officially register the guild, remember?" Jinwoo pondered for a moment. Finding a third member wouldn't be difficult. He knew several hunters he could trust. Then, as if reading his mind, Jinho suddenly mentioned something odd. "Oh, by the way, someone's been looking for you. A foreigner. Speaks English." Jinho handed Jinwoo a slip of paper with a cell phone number and a hotel room number. "They'll be in Korea until July 17th. Jinwoo's eyes narrowed. Someone had gone through Jinho to find him. That alone was intriguing. Publicly, their association wasn't widely known. As he contemplated the situation, a sudden sense of unease washed over him. Something was wrong. He had to get home. Now, without hesitation, Jinwoo activated Shadow Exchange. In an instant, he vanished, leaving behind only his shadow. Jinho, left standing in the empty office, yelped in fear. At that moment, in a dark alleyway, a university student let out a muffled cry for help. A knife pressed against her throat. The attacker, his eyes gleaming with madness, grinned as he relished the fear in her expression. "Did you know?" he mused. "People have died in this very spot. Lots of them. That's why I love this neighborhood." The girl trembled, barely able to breathe. Then, a voice emerged from the darkness. "Oh, I love this neighborhood too. The killer froze, his grin faltering. He turned, scanning the shadows. A figure stood nearby, calm, composed, watching. Sung Jinwoo. With eerie curiosity, Jinwoo tilted his head. So? Why do you do it? The killer's expression twisted with delight. Do I need a reason? I kill because it's fun. Gripping his knife, he lunged at Jinwoo, intent on making his next kill. Jinwoo remained unfazed as the killer lunged at him. With effortless precision, he defended himself, evading the attack with ease. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead as pain exploded through his body. Jinwoo had slashed his thighs and ankles in an instant. The killer collapsed, screaming. Jinwoo sighed, glancing at the darkening sky. It would have been nice to get home before nightfall. Seizing the moment, the terrified girl bolted from the scene. Jinwoo turned his gaze back to the writhing man. Turn yourself in before midnight. If you don't... He snapped his fingers. A high-level orc shadow soldier emerged from the darkness, its glowing eyes locked onto the wounded man. You won't live to see morning. Without another word, Jinwoo left, trusting his shadow soldier to enforce the command. As he walked home, Jinwoo glanced at the moon hanging high in the sky. Tomorrow was the Jeju Island raid. Though he wasn't part of the official team, his heartbeat quickened at the thought. He could only hope for the safe return of the S-rank hunters he knew. The next day, as the helicopter carrying the hunters soared toward Jeju Island, Goto Ryuji, Japan's strongest hunter, found himself unable to shake off the weight of his encounter with Jinwoo. A suffocating tension clung to him. Thoughts of death whispered in his mind. Grinding his teeth, he shook his head, forcing himself to refocus. It doesn't matter, he muttered. And yet, Jinwoo's presence had left a mark he couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, off the coast of China and Taiwan, battleships cut through the waves, stationed in the ocean, prepared for action. Near Jeju Island, a formidable fleet had deployed. On board one of the ships, Jong-soo, leader of the Knights Guild, reminded his team to brace themselves. The ants might have noticed us by now. Stay alert. One of his guildmates voiced concerns. Will our strategy even work against them? Jong-soo exhaled, watching the waves. We won't know until we try. But our job is simple. Stand guard and kill any ants that try to fly past us. We can't let them reach the mainland. Beside him, Jung Yuntai nodded, unwavering in his loyalty. I'll follow you anywhere, Jong-soo. Dong-wook, noticing her doubt, smiled. You've done more for this guild than you think. Your leadership, your planning. It's all thanks to you that we're here. His gratitude was sincere, but that didn't ease her anxiety. Just promise me you'll come back alive. Dong-wook gave a reassuring nod. In the Fiend Guild, tensions flared. Taegyu was furious over Minsung's dangerous deployment. He's too valuable to be out there. Move him to the back, now. The Hunters Association informed him that troop placements were final. They couldn't recall Minsung. Fuming, Taegyu clenched his fists. Then tell him to stay hidden, and if he has to fight, make sure he fights back. At the request of the Hunters Association, the strongest guilds, Hunters Guild, White Tiger Guild, and Fame Guild, were all stationed south of Jeju Island. Even if the raid succeeded, there was still a risk. Mutant ants could escape, spread, and invade the mainland to rebuild their colony. To counter this, an unprecedented force had been gathered. Among them were not only active hunters, but also retired hunters and individuals who had awakened, but never pursued hunting as a career. 5,000 of them. 1/10 of South Korea's 50,000 awakened beings had joined the fight. And yet, the battle was only just beginning. As the helicopter neared Jeju Island, the hunters inside steeled themselves for the battle ahead. The stakes couldn't be higher. Among them was a cameraman from a news agency specializing in hunters. His job was to capture the raid in real time for a nationwide broadcast. However, the footage would air with a 10-minute delay, allowing editors to filter out any sensitive content. Park Yoon-ho found it hard to believe that someone would voluntarily enter such a dangerous battlefield just to record it. What was Mr. Go thinking? Sensing the unease, Dong-wook spoke up. A successful hunter is one who has someone to protect. He turned to the cameraman. Stay safe out there. The cameraman, despite being an A-rank hunter, visibly trembled. Dong-wook, however, knew the truth. This would be the first and last time civilians would witness an S-rank raid. After 3 failures on Jeju Island, the world was watching. They needed a clean victory. Failure wasn't an option. Trying to shake off the looming tension, Baek struck up a conversation with his old friend, Byung-gyu. Despite being retired, Byung-gyu, the only S-rank healer in Korea, had volunteered for the raid. His presence was a relief to everyone. With a healer on their side, they could fight without hesitation. The conversation lightened the atmosphere until Cha Hai-in turned to Baek. Did you meet with Jinwoo? Baek shook his head. Number Hai-in frowned, but let the topic drop. Meanwhile, Goto Ryuji and his Japanese strike team were the first to land. They walked through what used to be Jeju City. Now it was a wasteland. Dead ants littered the streets. Strangely, many of the corpses showed signs of cannibalization. Goto narrowed his eyes. There's a predator among them. Maintaining strict communication, he called for a roll call. Bravo, Charlie. Delta. Status? Each team responded immediately, confirming their positions. Satisfied, Goto gave the order. Open the floodgates. At once, huge waves of mana exploded across the island. Baek Yunho and Choi Jong-in, watching from a distance, felt the surge. The Japanese must have started their operation, Jong-in muttered. Then the sky darkened. Hundreds. Thousands. A swarm of mutant ants erupted from the mountain. They shot into the air like black bullets, reacting instantly to the approaching helicopter. Jong-in, the lone mage hunter, stepped forward. His mind calculated the best way to handle 2E swarm. These ants weren't normal. They had evolved. Without hesitation, Jong-in activated his skill. Flame Spear. 7 blazing fireballs materialized around him. Then he launched them. The spears tore through the sky, igniting the ants' wings on impact. The once fearsome swarm plummeted, their bodies consumed by fire. But Jong-in didn't relax. His attack was effective, but not enough. The ants were disabled, not destroyed. With a deep breath, he channeled more mana into his next spell. This time, a blazing inferno roared to life in his hands. He hurled it into the sky. Boom! The explosion lit up the battlefield, wiping out the remaining ants. Jong-in exhaled. Satisfied, he took a step forward and jumped. Landing effortlessly on the scorched earth below, he surveyed the ruins left by his magic. The battlefield was his now. The ants didn't just burn. They exploded. For a brief moment, memories surfaced. As a child, he used to burn ants with a lighter. Back then, their bodies had made a faint snapping sound as they curled in the flames. Now, they erupted like fireworks. With a smirk, Jong-in signaled to the others. It was safe to descend. Dong-wook clenched his fists. Unlike previous raids, there would be no escape this time. If they failed, they would be trapped inside the ant tunnels. The Japanese strike team was buying them 1 hour. 1 hour to defeat the Queen. A do-or-die mission. He turned to his team. Focus. Stay efficient. No mistakes. After a brief pause, he gave the signal. The 6 strike squad members, along with the cameraman, jumped. Their hearts pounded. Their minds were set. The battle for Jeju Island had begun, and the fate of South Korea, perhaps the world, rested on their shoulders.